So I'm going to call the WSESD board meeting to order at 6:03. The meeting of the WSESD will come to order. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means that some or all of the public body is meeting remotely and some are meeting physically in a previously noticed location where the public may attend to observe, listen, and participate contemporaneously. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. There have been some changes to, my understanding, changes to remote and what's allowable, what's required, et cetera. So I think we're going to probably work through some of that information at some point and some conversation about that. So if a member of the public or of the public body has technical difficulties accessing this meeting remotely, please alert us by email. In the event of a technical difficulty that cannot be resolved, we may continue the meeting if necessary to time and place certain. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting that are not unanimous will be done by roll call. Okay, so we will move on to student matters 5 to 10. Oh.
Can I make an amendment to today's agenda? Do I do it now or do I wait?
Do it now.
I do it now. Okay. So on the agenda, F10, reporting suspected child abuse or neglect is listed for readoption, and it is not ready for readoption. We are pulling it back to committee, please. That's the only change.
Okay, so would you just like to change it from readoption to just an explanation of why it's being pulled back, or just a brief
An explanation of why it's
during
Okay, great, perfect.
Okay,
great.
Okay, so are you making a motion to amend the agenda?
Yes, I am making a motion to amend the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Deborah, for that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Liz. I think Sean got it before you, but thank you for being the second. All those in favor of amending the agenda in regards to the policy that Deborah laid out, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, wonderful. So now we will move on to student matters, 5 to 10 minutes. Are there any students? I don't see any students here in person, but are there any on Zoom?
Both
that would
Ben and Kaya are on Zoom.
We would love to hear from them. Thank you. Ben and Kaya, if one of you would like to speak, we would love to hear from you.
I guess we can give a little bit of a student advisory committee update here. We unfortunately couldn't meet last Thursday because of the snow. So other than that, we haven't had that follow-up meeting. So not much to share because we haven't had a meeting since the last board meeting.
Okay. Thank you very much. Kaya, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, Ben basically said what I was going to say anyways. It's just that we couldn't meet, but that meeting was rescheduled. So.
Okay, thank you. We will look forward to hearing from you after you are able to meet. Are there any other students in the Zoom who would like to?
That's not that I can necessarily identify.
All right, so one more time, we'll ask for students and moving on. Thank you very much, Ben and Kaya. We will move on to the consent agenda. The clerk's report, is there a motion to approve the minutes of January 9, January 10, January 12, and January 16, 2023?
So moved.
Thank you, Deborah. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Michelle. All those in favor of approving the minutes of January 9, 10, 12, and 16, 2023, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, wonderful. So now we will move on to public comment on non-agenda items for 10 minutes. Anyone making a comment can expect a response that falls into one of the following categories: receive an acknowledgement of the comment with no further action planned.
Other charger out.
Receive an immediate response by the
computer charger out.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. Receive an immediate response by the board chair or administration. Administration would be directed to contact and respond to the person. Clarification sought from the administration for a specified meeting. The topic would be added to a specified future board agenda. The matter would be referred to an executive session. A public hearing would be held on the matter. Is there anyone here who would, or in Zoom, who would like to make a public comment on non-agenda items? I will ask a second time, public comment on non-agenda items.
Hi there. Can I make a comment?
Absolutely.
It's actually more of a question, and it's really the only.
Can you identify yourself, please?
Sure. Yep. My name is Faith Bluen, and I have kids at Green Street and at BUHS.
Thank you.
I actually just jumped on tonight to find out if what I'm thinking is correct. I'm trying to get my children to be able to stay at Green Street and BUHS if I move out of the district. And I'm told it's more of a possibility for this year, but I would have to ask a second time in the summertime, as my sixth grader will be going to BAMS. And so I'm wondering if that is the case.
Hi, Faith, it's Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Nice to see you.
Nice
So
to see you too.
the process, Faith, you would write a letter to myself and Kate
Yep.
with your request and the details behind it. And then I would review that request with the school board.
Okay, I did that today, and I was pretty sure you wouldn't see it by tonight, but I just wanted to, because we are having to make a decision kind of quickly as far as to whether or not to buy a home. And I was pretty sure that the kids would be able to stay in school this year, but it really matters because I don't want to take Noah out of BAMS next year. So could you give me a possible time frame as to when I might expect an answer on something like that?
When's the next board meeting?
The 14th of February.
The next board meeting is the 14th of February, which is a bit away.
Okay, well, we'll just have to hold out till then.
We could
a little
also,
less.
we can talk offline, Faith, as well, if you want to give me a call.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that.
Yep,
Okay, thank you. Have a good night.
you too.
Thank you for that question. Maybe other people in the might have that question in the future. So thank you for asking that question.
Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Wendy, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry for the interruption, Madam Chair. Faith, I didn't catch your last name and I need to get it in attendance. Can you spell it for me, please?
Sure. Yep, it's B as in boy, Louin.
Blouin.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Wendy. Is there anyone else public comment on non-agenda items? Okay, we will move along to unfinished business, sexual abuse investigation update. I don't think I have anything to add to that. Okay. Okay, policy review. We are now at the point where I'm handing it over to Deborah for a few moments.
Okay, so I'm just going to begin with the policy that I am moving for readoption this evening. And it's policy F21, policy on the use of restraint and seclusion. So I move that the WSESD school board approve F21 for readoption.
Okay, there's been a motion to approve the policy F21, policy on the use of restraint and seclusion.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. So Deborah and Liz, thank you, both of you. And is there any discussion?
Yes, from me.
You would-
Yes. So as you look at this policy, the opening paragraph begins with a sentence in red that represents an edit by the Policy and Amendment Committee. And it reads, Windham Southeast Supervisory Union, Windham Southeast School District staff ensure safety for self and others at all times by prioritizing the use of de-escalation supports and only using restraint and or seclusion as a last resort. There is another change at the bottom of the second page, and it's an expansion of 2.12, which is a definition of seclusion. And in red, it reads, in accordance with F502.2, seclusion may only be used when the student is visually monitored at all times by an adult. So those are the two changes by the Policy and Amendment Committee. We really cannot change much in this policy because it is regulated by the Board of Education. And I just want to make note of another point, and that's the final paragraph of this policy, and it's not a change. I just want to state that the implementation of this policy having to do with administrative procedures requires an annual report to the board by the superintendent. So those are the points that I want to highlight in this policy. And the statements represent a number of committee meetings with input from Robin Morgan, from Tate Erickson, who is here. I see. Thank you. Great. That way you can answer all questions about this policy. Thank you. As well as board members sitting on the committee and sorry, that's my phone. Sorry.
Animal policy is next.
Thank you. Those are my talking points, not my phone.
Any questions?
I do have a question. You said the WSESU and the WSESD. So I was wondering, is that did that have input from Verna? In other words, I was kind of curious where they are district, or where two district supervisory government. So the other school being the other town being Vernon.
So it should probably, you're right, Sean, it probably should be an SD policy that the SU board could then adopt in terms of process.
So I see Carrie has her hand up, but I also want to say that she is on my extensive email stream. So hopefully she has seen it. So
Carrie?
I have seen it, and we're always watching and talking about it in Vernon. So Deborah, thank you for keeping our policies moving forward. And then Vernon will do what we need to do to make sure that our policies stay up to date as well, basically cribbing your work. So thank you.
Carrie, I have a question. Will the SU board need to then officially adopt it?
I would say we would, if it's on our policy list as well, we should go through a full policy review as well.
Okay.
So that's something we as an SU board need to get scheduled. There's a great deal of work to do there because we're behind.
Was there a reason why WSESU was named in the opening sentence of this?
I'm assuming because I'm about to say the obvious, I'm sorry. I'm assuming that it's because it's a bridged policy that incorporates all the schools. That's the best I can say right now. Tate, I don't know, you're certainly SU, aren't you?
Right.
And you were critical to pulling this policy together. But I know that's not a valid reason, what I just said. So,
Would it
hearing what I've just heard, does this warrant giving Kerry a chance to present it to the Vernon board? Or Kerry, is the Vernon board even dealing with policy at this time?
I would suggest we note Sean, what he has observed on the policy and go ahead and hopefully pass it tonight.
Okay, and Kerry has her hand up again, I noticed.
I just would say I agree with what Mark said. I think that's the best path forward, and anything where Vernon requires a local board policy, we'll do it. But if it's an SU policy, and if SU is named, we'll fall under it. But I do want the SU to be looking at these as well.
Okay, so is there any other discussion, question, comments on the F10?
F21.
I'm sorry, F21.
F21.
Go ahead.
Okay, wonderful. So, Michelle.
Sorry, I'm just trying to clarify. So, because I think we've done so, I've never seen both this SU and SD listed in one. So I guess basically at our next SU meeting, what we're saying is that the SU board will also adopt it with the current revisions, and we think that that's good. We have done that. We have adopted changes put into SD policies and just done it at an SU meeting.
That would be up to the SU board, but it sounds like a good idea.
Okay. So then all those in favor of adopting F21 policy on the use of restraint and seclusion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, wonderful. So, and now you had F10, which is
F10. Reporting suspected child abuse or neglect. We are still tweaking the wording of this policy with the intention that as many people as possible are informed by the actions of a mandated reporter, so that it's not just a single linear line within the school system, but it really branches out just as an additional series of checks and balances with this policy. So we keep on rocking back and forth with it, especially in the climate that we're in with an ongoing investigation of allegations of sexual abuse. So that's what the delay is about with this policy, just going over it very carefully.
okay. So then maybe we'll see that at the next meeting or a future meeting.
Hopefully, yes. I mean, yes, you will.
Okay. So, board training, the final restorative process training, it looks like February 1st is the date that we're, and so an email should be going out soon. I'll be speaking with Mel Motel to try and help her clarify how she would like to set that up. Yes.
I noticed that on the agenda that refers to the restorative process. I think if my memory serves me right, it's actually restorative practice.
Sean, thank you. Okay. I'm gonna highlight that and underline and thank you. So restorative practice training. Okay, so, and then board retreats. The SU board has spoken about doing some board retreat work, and that will carry over into, will actually be the next term's SU board, but this board, of course, carried over into next term, would likely benefit from having some similar board retreats. And Terry, did you want to speak about the discussion on the SU board?
Sure, if you would like. I've been in touch with Kanisha, who is the woman who handled our last retreat from the VSBA. Our thoughts right now is that we try to, if possible, the week of February 6th and possibly on February 6th, which is a Monday, have a 2 hours, but let's be real, 3-hour meeting where we spend the first amount of time wrapping up our norms. I know that we as an SU had a discussion around these, and I'm happy to share that chart that the VSBA helped us make. But having a good 20-30-minute discussion on those norms would be a great way to move forward. And then if it works, it would be great to have the next segment of the VSBA training, which I think was called Conditions for Success. And that would be with board members and administrators. And that's where we're contemplating, if this is the will of the boards, focusing on how we set up a yearly calendar of board work, including goal setting and how we have our summer retreat. I know Mark has made his own calendar with board meetings and topics and all of that. And I feel like we owe it to everyone to do our side of that work and come up with the calendar of how we are going to work together as boards. So having an understanding of when our priorities should be set, when we would be checking back in, when we need to make budget decisions. I think all of that work is what we really need to try to do next with our administrators. That's my spiel. That's my plan.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. Is there any discussion of the board or questions or comments?
Yes, is the February 6th date a firm date at this point? To meet with.
It is not a firm date, so I'm sort of looking for guidance on what could work. People. And that includes administrators. So Mark, I'm going to need your help there. If I'm hoping to talk to Kanisha tomorrow and maybe zone in on a date.
Okay. Is there a conflict with this?
Well, so we set up as of yesterday, a policy meeting, the next one on February 6th at 2:30. So that's going to meet from 2:30 to 4:30 on the 6th. Unless we're
if I promise dinner, will that help?
From where?
Tim will bring the chocolate.
Yeah, got him here.
Sure.
Dinner works for me.
So maybe Mark can respond to Carrie, and maybe if there's any conflicts with the 6th, BSD board members can let me know, and I'll let Carrie know. So, okay. Thank you, Carrie. I think that's.
Thank you.
Now I think we move on to the administrative report.
Hey, well, hopefully we will be adopting a budget tonight, which is exciting. And so in my report, I wanted to highlight areas of building, facility, maintenance, and staffing, which is essentially most of what our budget entails. So to start with staffing, I would say number one challenge in education, public education right now, and certainly we have seen this, is the handling of staff turnover and large amounts of staff turnover in the past 3 years. But I think maybe the trend is getting a little positive. So I'll give an example from last year. At this point in time last year, we had 25 teachers announce their retirement and 35 resignations. So a total of 60 employees leaving the school district at this time last year. As of today, the number is half of that, 14 retirements and 16 resignations. So the school year 2021, previous to last year, the figure was in the 60s, 70s at this time of year. So a nice trend, but still that's a lot of turnover. And the pressure of moving forward with new professional development, balanced with the challenge of continuous backfilling of previous PD from previous years is a challenge that we're working on, but is certainly on the forefront of our planning. Things that we have in place for that is the structure of our professional development days, staff meeting agenda building, central office school-based instructional coaching, diversity, equity, inclusion, teacher leaders, and coaching positions. Lots of those new positions were supported in last year's budget, and we're asking for support moving forward in this year's budget. Another highlight that we're excited about is Stacy Musso, our HR director, has identified 4 job fairs that we will be attending in the month of March. One in Burlington at UVM, Western New England College, Brandeis University, and Norwich University. We are in the process of developing recruitment videos and content for those job fairs. In that, the creation of that content is a collaboration of HR, administration, Office of Diversity Equity, curriculum and assessment, special ed, our teaching staff, and of course, our students. So we're at the stages of developing that marketing campaign. So kudos to Stacy for taking the lead on that for us. This past Thursday, I attended a VSA, Vermont Superintendents Association, all-state members meeting. Last Thursday, the 19th, it was attended by all superintendents, Secretary French, state representatives, including Nadir Hashim, who I was able to spend a couple of hours with. He serves on the Ed Committee and is a county representative. Also, Mike Pichek, the new Vermont State Treasurer, joined us, who's also a local of Windham County. The entire afternoon of that meeting was dedicated to facility management, and essentially all of the challenges that Vermont school districts are facing in regards to failing facilities. So during that afternoon, I continuously reflected that we don't really have a lot of the same challenges that were being presented last week. So it led me to think of our work around budgeting, capital planning, where we have been very much focused on staying on top of our buildings. We still do have many challenges ahead. But my overall reflection from last Thursday was, we're in a good place. We focused on ventilation systems, new heating systems, square foot additions, under the framework of maximizing energy efficient projects. We approached ESSER with hiring new staff, as well as investing on new technology in our buildings. So I thought, we have work to do, and we'll talk about capital potentially tonight. But I felt like in terms of the state of Vermont, we're in a decent place. We haven't ignored our buildings. Then the last topic, which is we're dealing with right now, is the PCB state initiative from the legislature. So currently all schools in Vermont need to test for PCBs. That testing started at Oak Grove for us last spring. Currently just started recently at Green Street School. And it will be happening in all of our schools in the coming months. I'll ask Frank to jump in and share your thoughts on this, but frankly, the initiative has been a bad experience, to be frank. Poor communication to schools from the various agencies, at times felt like we're in the middle of a political agenda. lack of communication, lack of approaches to mitigation efforts, the scientists not willing to tell us what we're supposed to do and when to do it. So it has not felt organized. It's felt like an initiative set up to fail. I was able to share that harsh criticism on Thursday last week. And I believe Frank had that opportunity last night at the Vernon board meeting. But it's a major headache, and we're going to be dealing with it for months to come. Frank, do you mind just sharing a couple of words on that experience?
Yeah, so it's an initiative that started by the legislature, and apparently it's relatively new in the country. So Vermont has taken an initiative, which, you know, we applaud them on addressing safe schools, but they launched a process and a program without the state capacity to to implement. So as Mark said, what's happened is there's been various vendors that come in and do work and come up with some testing results, and then a very confusing array of, well, what does it mean? What should we do? When should we do it? And who should do it? And by the way, who's paying for it? None of that has been a clear path. So that's what we are sorting through. You know, the good news is that we are not in the situation that Burlington High School was in, where it was deemed that there needed to be immediate action, which is essentially remove the students from the school. For us, we are in this category called school action level, which means some modification of our program operations at Oak Grove School. But as long as we're able to address these, what they call mitigating procedures, then we can continue to do what we've been doing. So we're disappointed that it's just been so unclear. And as Mark said, oftentimes seemingly to put the school officials in the seat of assessing health risk associated with scientific analysis of conditions that we have no experience interpreting. So
well-intentioned, but not thoroughly communicated.
Can you just explain what avenue of exposure are they concerned about? Like, is it something that's in the air, in the water? What is it that is being tested and that they're concerned about?
Mostly the air, right? Yeah.
And how did it get in the air? Like, if how would it have gotten in the air if these levels are found to be high? Is it something in the building materials or like electrical devices? Do you know what is it that caused them to be concerned about it being particularly in the school buildings?
Well, generally PCBs were used in, was it the 1950s?
Yeah,
construction
and banned in I think 1988. Yeah.
Okay, so it's like suspected construction materials.
And I think the statement that the PCB levels are high still remains to be seen. The levels are there, they have been detected, but what that level means, whether that's a high level or a low level, is still apparently unclear.
Mm-hmm.
I see.
And typically it was in the caulking of like for window treatments. It's in other applications, but that's the primary one in schools. And we know that we've intended to replace the glass block windows. They're extremely inefficient thermally, and they don't diffuse light very well for learning surfaces. So we were prepared to remove those block windows, and then this initiative started that said, well, hold up, you know, we got to test them. And then that's when they indicated there appears to be these levels. And as Paul was saying, they're not very definitive about what that really means, other than it's not an immediate action level that we need to, you know, change our school operation. it needs to be modified, but it can continue with some kind of modification. That's what we're working through right now.
Communicating confusion is a difficult place to be in.
You had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just wondering, when was this initiative? Is it a bill that actually passed?
Yeah.
And do you know the date of that passage?
I don't off the top of my head. Was it last
It's
spring?
Relatively recently.
Yeah, it was last legislative session. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it does appear, as Mark said, from a political issue, in that certain folks took the initiative to get the requirement, the mandate started, but it does not appear that the funding aspect of it was thought out or committed to. It seemed to be fuzzy. That's the issue. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. So that I think that's part of the issue, is the state agencies are not clear who's responsible to do what, when, but they're putting us in the position of solving that problem and coordinating it on their behalf.
So I recall, I don't know whether it was early summer or not, that there was work being done on a particular school, whether it was taking down drywall or windows or something. And you, Frank, mentioned the potential of contaminants. And I remember asking a question about that. And you said it'll be fine by the beginning of the school year, or will all be contained, right? So is it on this level? Is it about PCBs?
If your question was related to that, it was. This conversation got started in May of last year, and initially the state said, we will have testing completed in June. We will inform you of your course of action by July, and you'll be ready to roll for your school year, obviously before we start sending out letters around where the bus stops are and, first aid. So if your question came in, as you said, about that early end, that was the context that we were given in terms of the road ahead. But testing didn't actually get completed. It's still not completed. It didn't really even get started until just a few days before school started. So way off their initial timeline that they had mapped out.
So I don't know whether the school that I'm thinking of was Oak Grove or Academy.
Academy is the one that just completed a construction project.
Okay. But that was a major construction project.
Yeah.
Right.
They had the same block glass wall, and it was tested, and it had no PCBs. So that project proceeded. It did have asbestos, and there's a well understood protocol for asbestos abatement. So all of that went through on plan and on budget. Yeah.
Dummerston had ours tested this summer with no detection. So there's one.
Nice.
We don't have to worry about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to go back to something more cheerful. And that is what Mark said about all the facility changes that have been made over a long time. I mean, it must be almost a decade. And, I have to thank Frank Rucker for initiating all of these projects, trying to reduce the carbon footprint, trying to go as much as possible to renewable energy in heating and Robert Clark doing all the LED lighting. So I think that's what Mark was referring to. I mean, it's been substantial, and it's just been an initiative that the district has taken and completed some very successful projects. I mean, I think there's only one school now in the district that does not have alternative energy, a renewable energy source for heat. It's a lot out of 9 schools.
Yeah, and that's the Oak Grove School. And actually today, I've been working very hard along with my staff on a Department of Energy grant that we we learned about awfully late in the game. It's due Thursday. It's a couple $1 million grant that we're applying for, and there's only 80 million in this allocation nationally. So that could be spent by one district somewhere. So we're working as hard as we can, but that is what we've done over many years. Is if there's an opportunity for funding, so often that's the problem, is the initial cost to fund these energy improvements, particularly fossil fuel retrofits, has been at that level before we were merged that put us into these penalty boxes as independent systems, and they just didn't go forward. But when we started having access to these various grants, it made it almost a cash flow positive investment. We did it in every town. I worked with all of those individual boards, and then when we merged, we pulled those capital plans, as you know, together, and you've seen those. Actually, that's another topic for tonight. But it's been a really good team, as you mentioned. Robert Clerk and our facility managers are just super dedicated to this work, and it's been very successful.
And our principals really engaging in the process and working with the community on education of why these projects are so important.
And ultimately, the community has been supporting them. So it's great.
And the boards.
Right, absolutely.
That's the report for tonight.
We are on to the fiscal report, FY24 budget discussion. And
Okay, so I've sent around a hard copy for revisions that we discussed last meeting. I've got a couple extras here, folks. Anyone missed one? And I can give you a quick summary of the changes. They're not significant, particularly given that there's some net revenue impact. So when we get to a tax rate, it's really a very small impact. So maybe I'll just start with that. In the document that I've just shared with you, if we go to the tax impact document, which is page 3, and that would be the lighter document, only 19 pages, and the one with the graph on the front. So page 3, the draft that we had started with, and it was using estimated state statistics. Our previous page 3 had a equalized tax rate of $1.515. So $1.51. And this new one, if you look at line 33, kind of in the middle of the page, you see $1.513. So if you put that in the context of a $100,000 house in a property tax assessment, we went from $1,515 to $1,513. So as I said, we've made those adjustments that were discussed at the board meeting last week, and you can see a fairly minimal impact on the bottom line. The other figures that have an impact, unfortunately, we have no control over them, as the CLA adjusted tax rates, and those are at the bottom of the document. We did manage to move Guilford down under 8% and Putney under 6%. So that's a little bit of a favorable change. I had also mentioned at the last meeting, and we spoke a little bit more extensively at it at our Finance and Independent Budget Committee, line 34. Line 34 on this same page 3 is the number that affects most Vermonters. It's the income sensitivity provision. of the school funding law. And that is indicating that if folks are eligible for income sensitivity, the capped percent of income for school property tax is 2.66% of household income, which is down 4% from the prior year. So as far as the changes, I'll just, again, just quick highlight. We discussed an increase in the board's budget proposal. We added the increased legal fees, so that line item is at 135,000 in this budget proposal. We made the adjustments to the stipends, and then the more significant change that offset that increase was the update in our equalized, or not equalized, but our Career Center 6 semester average. We had anticipated, based on very favorable news that Nancy has shared with us, that our current enrollment is up quite a bit. But when we put that into a 6 semester average, which the legislature requires, that number was actually, the new number is actually lower by about 10 kids. So that reduced our costs, because the high school BUHS has a line item in this budget that pays the Career Center based on the number of students attending. And that is a lower number. That was down about 161,000. And then I mentioned the adjustment in the Dummerston budget, we just had a redundancy in an employee record that had moved to another function in the budget. So in total, this budget is down from the earlier version by 240,000. And now you see the proposed budget for fiscal year 24, 62,704,000 is an increase of 2.7%. Previously, we had a reference of 3.2%. And that is as a result of those changes that I just shared with you. Morgan?
Yeah, okay. It was really surprising to me to hear that the tax rate went down a tiny bit, because I remembered all of the changes that we had made last time were adding money, but then you explained that it was because of the UHS having to pay less money to the Career Center.
That's right.
But isn't the Career Center money also part of our budget? Like, can you explain how does us paying money to ourselves make the total cost less?
Yeah, that's a great question. Intuitively, it makes no sense. When I first came to Brattleboro, I said, this can't be right. How is it that we have to budget $1 million to pay ourselves and it affects our tax rates? But the great state of Vermont has created a funding law that does require a fairly complicated accounting and budget process for Career Center. So I'm glad to get into any level of detail, but if you
that's enough of an answer for me.
If you look at page 9 of that summary, Nancy's laughing with me.
I'm sorry, it's
Yeah.
awful.
Yeah.
I mean, it is just literally, there is a legislative initiative to study Career Center funding, because it is such a mess that, and a 6 semester average when you take into account COVID. So for 3 years, I'll be paying for COVID. I mean, or we as a district will be paying for COVID and the fact that our numbers dropped. The only good news is our numbers went up enough that we get a little extra money.
Yeah.
But it's the way the formula is, Robin, I like every year I think I ask Frank to re-explain it to me.
Well, so I won't go into the details because I know you're not that interested, but we did speak at length at finance, just a little bit, and that's a recorded Zoom. So if you're really interested, but basically what it does is it shows that we take spending at the Career Center, we look at the number of students attending, and then we have to apply like 4 state indices, statistics that they give us that we are required to report and translate into tuition expense that we have to write our check to ourselves for, but then also revenue that is derived by the number of kids times these indices. So it's both expending and revenue that is affected by the number of students that are recorded. So that's the short story.
Thank you, Frank.
Good.
My students only count as half a student because they're only with me part of the day. So that gets it even more challenging.
So as far as budget development and process, as you know, our timeline called for us beginning the process back in November, and finance met essentially each week starting toward the end of the November. We looked at an elementary budget proposal, then a separate document on secondary. Then in the middle of December, we focused on the revenue assumptions that we had available to fund the elementary secondary. We then also focused on the capital plan. So you may recall our last meeting, we discussed that. And then once we got the state statistics, we were able to start computing estimated tax rates. So this version also incorporates the latest, and as far as I know, the final statistics on equalized students and Career Center enrollment. So I believe we have our assumptions. We had a lot of good questions and analysis. Our independent budget review committee has been with us all of these meetings and participated. I'm meeting with members tomorrow to address some of their questions. So our next steps are, we would hope board would be comfortable with action to approve the budget this evening, so that we can proceed as we normally do with development of the annual report that's required to be distributed on a timeline prior to the district meeting. We also understand for the first time in our history of Windham Southeast School District that we will have that in-person meeting that was contemplated under the Articles of Agreement. I haven't had that because of the pandemic. So that's March 21st. And we would require a March 14th public information hearing to provide an overview of the proposal. One last thing is we would require the statutes require a board action on a warning the budget articles to be posted February 14th. So I'm just reading off what we have on the website there, our budget timeline document, and it's the one that we've been referring to now since October. So
I was thinking, if there are no questions at this moment in time, I thought it might also be an opportunity to reflect on the different board presentations that we've tried to highlight this school year as it reflects to the investment, the actual budget that we're working towards. Would that be okay? Okay. And principals, administrators, jump in. But I like to refer to this calendar that we've been working off of since August, that hopefully we will do as a collaborative leadership team in June at the end of this school year. as we've approached, the way we approached this calendar to develop presentations was essentially to use our action plan as the framework to highlight different work throughout the year. So last month at our admin meeting, we did a little activity where we wanted to hear from individual school sites. What are the priorities of your goals? And themes that came out were curriculum implementation, assessment, EST, MLSS development, diversity, equity, inclusion, peer observation, trauma-informed learning, and then embracing outdoor learning. It just so happens that those themes are directly related to our current action plan that we're working towards. As we approach the start of the school year in August and September, we presented to this board presentations around Act 1 training, which we're very well aware of what that is now. MTSS development to start the school year, student leadership retreat, another highlight on BUHS for Act 1. And then we took a closer look at summer camp student enrichment initiatives. As we headed into October, we presented on trauma-informed practices that have been developed. We had Bethany from Putney and Hannah from BUHS. Our curriculum and assessment team presented on the assessment toolkit. Current work that we're doing around the rollout of curriculum in literacy and math. And then we shared a unified goal of uniting curriculum assessment office with the diversity office moving forward in our work with all of our schools, teachers, and staff. November, we started the budget timeline. We got a presentation by the Career Center on student engagement opportunities there. We did a data presentation, academic data presentation to the SU board. And we heard from early ed services with Deb Gass and her team, early childhood opportunities. Back to December, we took a closer look at HHB Title IX and the collaborative work of the board and the administration in terms of the sexual abuse investigation. Obviously continued with budget. We were scheduled for an after-school program presentation that we didn't pull that one off. So that will have to come later in the year. In January, you heard from our social workers, work on our wellness policy, Act 173 prep with special ed. So all of those presentations are directly tied to our action plan and this plan that we've tried to present to the board and the community in a coordinated way. Moving forward, in February, you'll hear from us on play-based instruction, outdoor classrooms, outdoor gardens, Chris Overtree with the panorama work in all of our schools. In March, we'll take a deep dive on diversity, equity, teacher leaders, a closer look at our ELL work and refugee integration. And we'll present on our supervision evaluation and what we use in our work as administrators. April, again, we'll take a closer look at the diversity equity coaching position that was supported by the board last year and is in this year's budget as well. And we'll also take a look at our coaching initiative that we've also invested in, academic coaches, curriculum coaches. What has been the impact thus far this school year? And how does that relate to distributed leadership? In May, again, the diversity office will showcase what's happening in schools with teaching staff. We'll highlight community partnerships and how that relates to field trips. And we'll get a end of the year check-in on MLSS and EST development, which we've presented on multiple times. and how a peer observation model can tie to that work. So these are presentations to come. And then finally, in June, we'll end the year with an update on EST, a panorama, climate reflection of the whole school year, and then a final end of the year review of our action plan. What goals did we achieve? What's working well? What's not working well? And then how does that presentation hopefully set this collaborative team up for a collaborative working retreat in June before we hit the summer vacation. So I know we all have this calendar. I just wanted to give a picture of how it relates to the budget, to the action plan, and just how intentional it is. So, thank you for hearing me out on that. Folks, feel free to chime in if you want to.
I'll share an experience from Putney, if that's okay. This fall, you know, there's a lot of new things at Putney Central with a new administrator and a lot of new staff, and we've been doing a lot of work around sort of visioning and values work and what we hold dear at Putney Central School and what we value as a community. And we spent a lot of time as a full staff looking at our assets that support the work that we do for students. And one interaction really stood out to me, and I was in a small group doing some of this work, and in that group is Amy Levesque, who's a third grade teacher who's been a teacher in the district for a long time, who's a phenomenally skilled teacher. And Amy reflected to me that the feeling right now is coming out of the pandemic and the level of student need is high, you know, academically and social emotionally and behaviorally, but that she feels that the supports that we have in the school system are equally high. And that I took to be pretty remarkable testament to our district and the work that we do in supporting kids, because we all hear about what school is like in a lot of places around the state and around the country. And to be able to reflect this feeling that a system is responding to the high level of student need, I think is huge testament to the board and the budget and schools and how we're looking at it. It's great. Yeah.
Can I just ask, you mentioned that the diversity equity coaching position was approved by the board last year. So maybe I should be up to date on this. I wasn't here last year in this position, but can you just talk a little bit about that position?
Again, we're going to highlight it at future board meeting, but essentially it's a direct relation to the other coaching models that are in place. So giving that office more resources to make more connections with teachers, other coaches, and ultimately the student experience. So it's investing into that office.
So does that position exist already?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Is that Michaela's position?
No, it's somebody else.
Who?
Shannon Kelly. It holds that position.
Her name is
Shannon Kelly.
I can add to that a little bit, because our curriculum and assessment office gets to coordinate a lot with the diversity and equity office and the social justice office. So Shannon's worked really hard bringing the social justice standards that were adopted into life, into the classroom. So working with teachers to create units and lessons where those can really be highlighted and implemented. She's been doing a lot of work. She's a former librarian, so she's been doing a lot of work using that expertise to really look at classroom libraries through the lens of equity and diversity, and has been taking inventory of our classroom libraries to collect data about that and meet with teachers about how to create better libraries for our students and calling books that shouldn't be there. She's worked closely with us on our professional development days, so we're really integrating the professional development offerings that we have to teachers through the diversity and equity social justice lens. And she's really made it a priority this year to work with new teachers. So whenever possible, giving that extra layer of support to some of our new staff. And certainly she works with anyone who wants to work with her and work on coaching cycles, but those have been some of the priorities. And I'm sure she'll do a much better job of highlighting that than I have, but she's a really integral part of our team.
I have a couple of questions. First, is there anything different, unique that we're doing this year to diversify the workforce? You mentioned you're going to 4 job fairs. What are you doing to attract diverse staff to our district?
Well, as I said earlier, we are going to those job fairs. That's not just coming from HR. It's a combination of working with the Office of DEI, as well as administrative team, curriculum office, special ed. It's a really unified approach to attracting a diverse pool of candidates. So we're not doing it in a silo. We're doing it in collaboration, and we're in the process of developing marketing tools, videos, content that'll help put us in a really good light for future applicants.
You address housing, or you can't address housing? Nothing you can do about that, except
And highlight community resources and things that are happening in our area to attract people. But we can't take on the housing issue.
Okay, also, there's been, well, this board is always interested in equity and spending in sports between boys and girls. So I just wanted to note for the board and for the Leadership Council at BUHS that has taken a particular interest in the athletic department, that spending for athletics is noted on pages 46 through 54 on this big document. And so anybody interested in where the money in sports is going to men and women, girls and boys sports, it's there. And then the last comment is my annual comment about the purpose of the merger to share resources. Do you see any trend? Are we sharing resources more and more every year, or is it pretty much the same now?
We've got maybe Paul and Mark, from an academic and a student support point of view, it's clearly a much more substantial sharing of resources. And I can comment in more of the operations area, but in terms of the way in which we've made sure that all of those school sites have that support in what Mark was describing around our social workers, our coaches, our student support systems, is far more readily available and equitable than it was prior to the pandemic.
Sure. The example of the expeditionary learning and illustrative math rollout of the new curriculum and the support that went behind that, very smooth across the district, rather than being, sort of this school or that school district adopting a particular curriculum. It's all sort of done from out of the curriculum office and to say equitable across the district, shared across.
So we have you and Bryn now. Before the merger, did Putney have their own curriculum coordinator?
No, but Putney, for instance, in my time in curriculum, there were periods where Putney's math curriculum was different from Oak Grove's math curriculum, from Dumbarton's math curriculum, for instance. It was a while ago, but
A concerted effort on developing systems of support and collaboration, and not working in silos, but getting our instructional coaches together on a regular basis, our special educators, expanding our administrative team to include more people that meet regularly. I would say the opportunities are tenfold than 5 years ago. Very much a united school system. Our curriculum office facilitates PLCs with teachers and coaches throughout the school district. We approach PD days in a very collaborative approach, K through 12. Not to say we have all the answers. There's still plenty of work to do. But I feel proud of the work that we have done over the last few years.
I think the change is so noticeable from the outlying town perspective. As someone who's a principal of an outlying town school, but also live in an outlying town as a resident, now that we can collaborate and, really benefit from the merger, not only are we sharing resources, but the whole process of building the budget is different. Because it's looking at schools more side by side and these common initiatives that we have, this common plan. Yes, we all have our unique flavor and culture at our school, but from a child's point of view, it should be the case that if I start my career at Dummerston and transfer to Green Street, that the outcome should be the same, the experience, the quality of the education should be the same. And it feels like with the merger, we're able to really have that conversation in an efficient way and plan those, those types of initiatives and the resources we need into the budget, looking at it together as a system. And that is, huge benefit to all schools, but particularly when you're in the outlying town school. I think in the old system, it could feel like, well, there's Brattleboro, right? And then there's, the other schools, on the outskirts, and it feels really like we're part of, this system, which is to all of our benefit. And I think, Tim, to your question around recruitment, that is a huge piece of recruitment, for teachers who apply or any staff who apply to this district to know that coming to this district means being part of a high functioning system, where you will be professionally challenged and rewarded intellectually. Working with others is a huge part of deciding where you're going to be as a teacher. And so bringing that to the forefront is incredibly important.
Yeah, Deborah and I participated in a blog, Harvard Teachers Ed blog some months ago. The main point they made was what teachers want more than anything, what keeps them in schools is autonomy, independence. Let them do what they're good at in the classroom.
Lana has her hand up.
Okay. Lana?
Thanks. I just wanted to add to what Tim was mentioning about the diversity and diverse hiring. And I think the schools you're visiting are fantastic. One of the things that I would say is looking at the demographic makeup of those schools, imagining that they're predominantly white universities. I think it might be worth reaching out to some of the HBCUs or non-predominantly white universities. So for instance, Howard University School of Education is having their 15th annual job fair for educators. And that's April 12th of this year. So it might be worthwhile to check that out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, things like that going forward. And I can send that to you, Mark, so you have it.
Thank you, Lana. Anne?
Sorry, a little trouble with my mic. Staying somewhat on the subject of equity, earlier in the finance meeting, we heard a parent speak about lack of equity in girls' sports at the high school level. Is there any way to address that without having to tear this budget to pieces?
Yeah, I can speak to that. Yeah, as Tim mentioned, there's a lot of detail on the budget proposal for co-curricular programs, and I do think that there are sufficient resources for the programs. So we're spending nearly $1 million for the total co-curricular program, which is a terrific commitment to our kids and our community. So my point is that if there are inequities, I'm sure working with Cassie and the other folks at the high school, that those issues could be addressed within those resources, so that we don't overlook an inequitable situation. And like with every budget, there's always unforeseen developments, and we are very good at, as we were just talking, having a system where we can look at the entire district, the 9 schools. And in finance, we were talking a lot about encumbrances and how valuable that is as a tool to be sure we manage with our resources. So if there's an inequitable situation in one of our budgets, we can address it without having to rewrite the entire plan.
Right. That's not something we want to wait on at all. Yeah. If something comes up like that, we want it addressed immediately, without a doubt.
And I think it's important to say, you know, even prior to starting to write the budget this year, there's already discussion around like the uniform schedule and sort of where our resources were going so that we could make sure that, you know, we were in compliance with Title IX and it was equitable. So that's, you know, incredibly important.
Thank you, everyone. That's great to hear.
Thank you, Anne. Keith, you had your hand up?
Yeah, just getting back to the benefits of the schools and kids with the merger. Just a kind of a small example, but also one that's really important to those particular families. You know, John and Julianne and I have worked with in Mark around kids who, you know, maybe something's hard at BAMS or Putney might be a better fit, or Dummerston, or vice versa. So we've exchanged students both ways. And prior to the merger, that was a little bit more like, you know, we were counting beans with money and we were charging families who were switching from one school to the other. Like they literally had to pay tuition. So there's been some nice, you know, that's just much more of a fluid, like, you know, system. And so that benefits those kids. Yeah.
I'm just curious because I remember when this merger first began, having people who asked about attending a school outside of their assigned town school. Lyle said that the hurdle was about busing, that providing students the opportunity to go to a school in a different town that didn't have bus service from that town to that town meant it was only available to people who could find their own transportation. Is that still the case, or has there been some kind of solution found to that?
I can't speak for, I mean, for Dummerston and Putney, we have buses that run between the two. So it's not a problem at the middle school. You know, I don't know about anywhere else.
There can be hurdles, and those are case by case kind of situations that we try to figure out, but there certainly are hurdles. Yeah.
We're going to go to Liz, and then I think Mindy has her hand up.
Liz, Mindy, and then Christina Naylor.
Okay, Liz.
Yeah, I'm very disappointed about the situation with the girls' uniforms, because the PP&E committee, we did a lot of work with the athletic department at BUHS. So having this issue come up, it shouldn't have come up, and I just want to register that with everybody. We had a hard time getting information, and it was difficult work, and it was supposed to have been solved, and it wasn't. So that's a disappointment for a lot of work that we did.
Well, maybe at a future meeting, we can present kind of where we are, the State of the Union, because I'm not sure that's the case.
Yeah, I'm happy to share what Chris has provided me in terms of the uniform schedule. And again, I can't go back in time and make sure that it was followed, not to say that it wasn't, but I think moving forward, having that piece of information and the schedule to follow so it's equitable is something that I'll be staying on top of, because I think it's extremely important. So.
Yeah, it could also add, I'm just looking at the line items, and you're right, Cassie, it's very equitable. In terms of the line item in the budgets, when you look at the supply line items, the girls and the boys amounts are very similar across the sports.
Page are you on?
I'm looking at the entire data, but I think if you look at
46 and 47.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, I think the issue is what's the inventory look like? Because the current allocation is very equitable, but if the inventory of the uniforms varies dramatically. And I think that's the issue that I'm hearing is then that's where we need to make an adjustment for the current inventory. If the future budget doesn't address it adequately. So as I say, I do think that that's not a difficult thing to address.
And I think the uniform schedule also is not set in stone. So if we determine that there is, a sports team that did not get what they were supposed to, we have to remedy that. That's important.
Cassie, I was struck by how little you're spending for a unified coach. That position is so great, and it's not costing us much at all. $3,000.
Yeah, I mean, I hope to grow that in the future, definitely. We have the support. So,
great.
The unified programs have sort of operated within themselves, but moving forward, I hope to grow that and have a bigger budget.
Yeah, we got some innovative people working in those programs. So I think there's room for that for sure.
Definitely.
And lastly, this is not to do with the budget, but the merger. It's great to hear how well it's working for the schools. But just speaking for myself, having one board dealing with 9 schools, it's a strain. This is an unusual year, of course, with COVID, with the investigation and all. But it's very difficult for one board to provide support, oversight for all 9 schools. And that's just something that we have to deal with as a board.
Well, I think that speaks to committing to a summer retreat where we sit down as a collaborative team and develop this game plan for next school year. And then the accountability comes in with the presentations, the data, the questions, the expectation. But that starts a cycle that is healthy, predictable, and collaborative. And we missed that this summer, but I think we can get that right at the end of June and build on this momentum that we have, which I feel is very positive.
I have a question. This is about the date of the meeting.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Sure.
I'm just wondering, what was the thought to have it in the ending of March? I'm asking because it's in the same week as Brattleboro's representative town meeting. And I'm concerned that these meetings being so close together is going to depress participation, especially by parents. The representative town meeting is punishingly long, and it's very difficult to get parents to participate, even though our voices are so needed in determining, you guys know, the town budget and everything. And I know that in the past, when we had a sort of analogous situation with the WHS 6 budget, that they usually had their meetings a little earlier, like in February, I think. Is that right, Sean?
No, well, Valentine's Day usually.
Yeah, which is February.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a really heavy lift to try and get folks to participate in even one of those meetings. And to have them both in the same week and the previous week, both of the info sessions, that's a lot of childcare. And even if we are providing it, which I hope we are, this is not the greatest time of day to have your kids in childcare, not at your house. The best, most equitable thing would be if we could send somebody to everybody's house and they could give their kids dinner and put them to bed instead of all being in the BUHS gym or wherever they're going to be. So I am assuming that it might be too late to consider shifting these dates for this year, but I would like to request that for future years, we not plan it for the same week as RTM.
So Robin, that was developed by the board, what's called the transitional board that formed the Articles of Agreement. I do remember that conversation. I don't know if anybody was on that. Yeah, that's right. Where Sean was there. So Yeah, that was picked through a discussion. I know that childcare and an ability to attend was discussed, and I think my recollection is that group felt that was a good compromise that date. So
I mean, what is it compromising between what?
yeah, you'd have to go back to those meeting minutes.
I feel like I attended all of those meetings, but I somehow missed this. Are you saying that it's in the constitution of this district that we have to have it that third weekend of March, third Tuesday of March?
I think it is, but there's some articles that can be amended and some that cannot be, and I don't know where that one fits, but we can find out pretty easily.
It seems really disadvantageous, particularly to Brattleboro more than the other towns. Which is like 2/3 of the students in the district.
So Mindy?
Mindy and then Christina.
Hi, I have a couple of questions. I'm aware of the concerns about the climate and equity concerns around the athletic department. I'm glad Cassie's aware of that too and paying attention. We also know there was that 2020 lawsuit, and Mr. Perrin and Pietro Lynn declared that they had prevailed, but clearly the athletic trainer who left raised a lot of concerns that I think raised the eyebrows and the concerns of the public as well in terms of athletic athlete safety and student safety, and also the treatment of kids or employees by the athletic department. So I want to know, is it true that the athletic director has sort of separate oversight of the budget once it's allocated? Is Chris Sawyer the one who decides what happens with that budget?
I mean, I can answer all of the departments, all my department heads, which would include Chris, create their own budget. And, you know, it is a responsibility of any department head to really come up with the line items and where the money is going to be spent. And that is something that I oversee as well. But, you know, our budget, once voted, is public record. I mean, anyone can see that information. And so that's accountability to make sure that, you know, there's fiscal responsibility in how his budget is being spent. You know, and there are times when, you know, I have to go to Frank about, you know, shifting something around. But, you know, he is held to the same standard that any department head is in creating their budget and following that budget.
Have there been any similar concerns about equity in any other departments?
No, but I will say athletics, you know, we don't take social studies and have, you know, female classes and male classes. So it's a little bit different. I think the opportunity for inequity in athletics is greater because of that. You know, but I can just speak to my values. I was a female athlete. It's very important to me that there's equity in our athletic programs. And that's a personal value that I have. So, you know, moving forward, Chris and I have, you know, communications on a regular basis around this. And the expectation is there, you know, there will be equity moving forward and the changes that need to be made, if any, to make that happen, you know, are going to occur.
Will he be showing up at any of the board meetings or in any way to address these concerns?
I want to be clear, you know, I am Chris's direct supervisor and evaluator. And so any, you know, conversations that occur sort of in that context really need to happen in the correct way, which would be between Chris and I. So, you know, although I welcome any department to come and share information about what they do and how their program is set up, you know, if there is a conversation that needs to be had around that, you know, respecting the master agreement and, you know, following the process as I would with any employee is very important.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mindy. I think Christina.
Emily also has her hand.
Okay, Christina, and then we'll, you'll be next.
I'd like to get a quick twofer in. I know that the date of the meeting, it can be changed on the master agreement as per Robin's request about the timing of the meeting. So I think it has to be changed by the electorate though. And I think the electorate has to vote on it. And I remember there was a big discussion that first meeting. So it may be 2 years before you can change that, but I will happily send you any information I have on that because I also served on the transition board. And I just want to echo Liz's concern, and I don't do that in any disrespect to Cassie, who's new in that seat and managing a lot in a very difficult time. But in 2019, parents came to us concerned that girls were having to wear extra large uniforms for track, for soccer, and track, especially where if you're a small person wearing a large uniform, it doesn't fit. And I just think it does not need to go back to the budget, but to hear this now in 2023, planning the 2024 budget, it's very upsetting. And we kicked it into the PPE committee to look at it. Chris Sawyer did a self-study, and to hear it now 4 years later, as somebody who ran track in a uniform that fit me, thank goodness, is very upsetting. So I just want to urge the board to put a follow-up sometime, maybe May or June, May before track season is fully in, to make sure that this has been taken care of, because it didn't land on my agenda to say, hey, is this taken care of? And it's upsetting to hear it's still going on for girls. So that's a respectful request to the future board chair. Thank you.
Emily has.
Deborah was first. Deborah.
So I think it was at the last meeting, or maybe it was at an SU meeting. So on the SU budget takes care of bus transportation to and from school for all of the schools. So when I look at this document, pages 46 and following, I see transportation, and I see transportation broken down by this particular sport. So is this only for BUHS? As it's broken down here on these pages?
The co-curricular is in the whole district, but typically the elementary schools don't have transportation for a like a football or field hockey and that sort of thing. So most of what you see there would be at the high school.
At the high school level. So then my follow-up question, if transportation is built into this, I presume that means it's transportation from the school site to the off-school site and then back again to the school site.
Mm-hmm.
So then if a student at BUHS wants to participate in a sports team, they will have transportation to and from the school site, back to the school site for the after-school activity.
No.
For
For a team. So if the transportation is for, if you have a game that's in Springfield.
Right.
Just for example, the student comes to school, gets on the bus at the time that sports team is leaving, goes to the game in Springfield, and then comes back to the school. Usually at that point, either the student transports themselves, depending on their age and their ability to drive or access to a vehicle, or a parent picks them up to take them home.
But they're transported back to the school site. Okay. And as you said, that's for a game. So then my next question is, are all practice events, not for game, but for practice, are they at the given school site, or do you have to travel to another location for the practice?
Depends on the sport and the team.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, hockey, we don't have a hockey rink.
Mm-hmm.
It did come to my attention during a leadership council meeting last month that we were not busing students there. And so I'm working with Chris Sawyer to remedy this, because I guess past practice has been like the students transport themselves. And really they're our responsibility, because even if they're practicing technically off-site, it falls under the umbrella of our liability. So, and I have to be honest, I was unaware that that was our past practice. I just assumed that we would be busing. So we are remedying that as we speak.
So we were sitting in that same meeting when that popped up to the
Yes.
surface. So then my next question is, if a student wants to participate in a particular sport where the practice is off-site, so they know they're covered for the games, but they are not necessarily covered in terms of transportation, getting to and from the school to the off-site practice field. That's correct, right? So then it's for the given sport, we could go through it sport by sport, but the transportation to be able to be a member of a team, it rests with the given student and the given student's family for the practice, but not for the game.
Well, I think that would be the purpose of busing, because it becomes an equity issue if we're depending on students to find their own transportation offsite,
right,
to participate.
And that would go for every single sport that the school offers, that in terms of equity, if you really want kids to be able to participate, but that particular student and family, they do not have access to transportation for the various practice dates, then the student cannot participate.
Aside from hockey, right?
Everything's here. Everything's on campus. The challenge can be things like basketball where a varsity team might practice late at night,
But oh, okay.
So soccer, field hockey, football, everything's here on campus. So they,
So then my next question, sorry, the building blocks of this to make sure I get this straight. So if the practice is on site, the student who wants to participate in that sport still is limited by the means that the family has to pick that kid up when there's only one bus per day. There's only one bus at 3:30, something like that, taking kids home. That's it. So if you have a working family, you have a kid who's doing a sport, but if you can't provide means for that.
I mean, in those situations, that's where you hopefully reach out to the school, reach out with the counselor and arrange an accommodation, because we don't want kids to not have access to practice. But for example, my daughter's basketball team, they have practices at 7:00 at night. We find a way to get her there, or she has a car now, but we had to make that work. Carpooling is a thing as well, but we can't provide busing for practices at the various times at night after school when practices are later.
Here, but it was hardly anybody rode the bus and it was super expensive. This was before I was here.
So again, that's where an accommodation where we come together and collaborate and solve a problem.
Because this also involves another budgetary item, which is tutoring, after-school support, which can only exist if there's a way for that kid to get home, for there to be after-school support. I know that the kids have said, I know that ACE exists during the day, but ACE is probably way too social in a certain sense. It's not working for academic support for the most part.
No, and we spent a lot of time talking about the schedule for next year and changes we can make. All of our clubs run during the ACE time, which is really nice. So if you want to be part of the RV car club, you don't have to do that after school. You can build that into your day. So students are able to be part of clubs without having to worry about that piece. And I think there is a place for tutoring or academic support to occur during that time. But I also recognize that many of our students are really requiring the social and emotional experience during that time. So, we're really looking at how we can make modifications to that time to be using it to the fullest.
But they do have a second after school bus at some of the schools. I know because my daughter rides it. She stays at Academy for a Lego club and then she takes the late bus home.
Yeah, Brattleboro, the high school, and BAMS don't have one, but I think it gets to be sort of complex because we have students in Dover, we have students in Dummerston, we have students in Guilford. I think having one bus logistically to figure out how to get all the, there's some kids that probably wouldn't get home till 8 o'clock. So
Emily has been waiting, so I'm gonna see if Emily would like to.
Yeah, I had two comments, but I think that the conversation that Liz brought up and Christina Naylor discussed regarding the uniforms, I was going to echo the same sentiment, so I'm not going to belabor that. It seems like we have an action plan for that. I actually had a question for Frank. Where in this budget could I see tuition reimbursements that we're getting from other districts? I wasn't sure what that was categorized under.
Yeah, so that's revenue. Do you have your summary document that we sent out? Yeah. So if you look on the revenue pages, it's going to be listed as a tuition receipt. And if you look at page 6, page 6. And you see the line there, it's tuition public Vermont LEAs.
33. Yep.
2.9 million is the actual, and then proposed, we're anticipating 3.2 million, which is a reflection of a little bit of a growing group of tuition students, but also an increase in the tuition rate based on our higher cost of education.
Okay, and I just wanted to this question has been coming up a lot to me, and perhaps it also was reflected in the public comment tonight. So when a person becomes out of district or starts out as out of district, there was some confusion from people as to whether they had to pay if they were accepted into the district, there was space for them and whatnot. I had been under the assumption that the sending district would then pay the tuition, but some families were discussing this with me and saying that they had to pay the tuition, which I didn't think was the case, but I wanted to double check that.
Yes, so the sending district would be on tap for the tuition. We're a united school district, so we have 9 schools part of our district. So we would not charge Dummerston family to attend BAMS.
No, this was more, so this was out of district, like this was if it's Marlboro or, Westminster West or these kind of things,
Yeah, that relates to the public choice law, public school choice law. So that's in Title 16. It's the section around the 820 series. And so in Vermont, there's public school choice grades 9 through 12, does not include 7 and 8. And in that instance, if a school district has a designated high school, like for example, Newfane designates Leland and Gray as its designated high school, if that student, the Newfane resident, wanted to go to Brattleboro Union High School, they have to apply through the school choice process. That's I think an application in February. Cassie, does that sound familiar?
Yes.
There's a agreement between the public schools in the region that say we will accept so many kids. Once that student, if that student's accepted, then there is no charge under the public school choice law. That student is if is accepted, is assured to be accepted for the remainder of their career. However, it's often confused with, okay, so let's say the Dover student wants to come to Brattleboro Union High School. Well, Dover has not designated as a secondary high school. They are called a tuition town. So that's Dover, Marlboro, Vernon. These are our school boards and towns that have said, no, we don't want to be part of a designated high school. We want to have choice. So under those circumstances, the resident board, so if the student lives in Dover, that school board has to pay. That's what Mark was referring to in terms of the statutes. And then as Mark also clarified, if you're talking about a resident within Windham Southeast School District, then there is no tuition charge. So there's 3 different kind of criteria. They're all mapped out in that Title 16 820 series.
In the first case you raised, because you're applying this to 9 through 12 or 7th and 8th grade, the first case you raised, would that apply to somebody who's like in 1st grade? Because they would definitely have a
public school choice. Yeah, is only grades 9 through 12. It's not any other grade.
Okay, so 1st grade, you go to there's no, because what I was hearing too from the first public comment, if you're in a different town, you couldn't choice in, you'd have to pay in.
If you're in a town that's outside of the Windham Southeast School District, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the process we started the meeting with a question to Mark. That is the issue. There is a process that's in the statutes, the way in which that is considered.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nancy, did you have something you wanted to?
Yeah, I was just gonna say just what came up, that if I decide as a parent so I live in Springfield, Vermont. So if I decide as a parent, I want my daughter to come to Brattleboro High School, and I'm not in a choice town, and and if I don't apply for her to come here as a school choice student, then I am responsible as the parent for paying for her to come here, because she can go to school for my tax rate in Springfield, but I don't pay taxes to Brattleboro, so I would need to pay tuition to Brattleboro if she was not accepted as a school choice student.
Any other?
Just one more thought on the budget. I remember very distinctly last year, you gave a 20-minute presentation on how well the district is doing in saving energy and addressing the climate crisis. It was a good presentation. And the emphasis was on data. Our students, of course, are very concerned about the climate crisis. Don't you think that for the students and families and the rest of us, it would be beneficial to set a goal of carbon net zero by 2024 or 2025, maybe 24 is too soon, which would necessitate measuring carbon output, of course.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've been trying to find a resource that helps us really quantify that from the industry standards, so that we know that we're going to meet the global climate goals that both Vermont has adopted and has been discussed, both nationally and internationally. So I've got some good references to folks that are in that business that will come in and assist us with defining where we are in our carbon footprint and what we would need to do for investments to get to net zero with that goal in mind.
That's good news, and I think it can only be beneficial if you involve students in this process.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah, I've had a little bit of interaction with Django in previous, and I'd love to see more of that and work with Cassie to see to what extent we can, really engage students, because it's something I care deeply about, and I've done that over many, many years. So,
what do you think goal might be set?
I really think it's a matter of agreeing on, how you quantify. There's an awful lot of, I think, sort of determined terms as to what net zero means. So what I would like to do is get the folks that are at the table with the legislative committees that are setting these standards with these timelines and penalties for not getting there, and work towards something that can really stand up. I have looked at some other area entities like the Putney Mountain School, the private school. They've done a terrific job with a sort of a net zero goal, and it's a great template. It costs a lot of money to get that template, but I am pursuing that with that in mind.
Good news. Thank you.
Yeah.
Lana?
I just wanted to say thank you so much to you, Frank, to you, Mark, and to all of our administrators for this hard work. I'm not sure a lot of districts can say that they're lowering their taxes amidst everything else that we're doing. So I really appreciate all hard work that's gone into this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have any other questions or comments or anything else on the budget before we move forward?
Go ahead.
Okay. Sean?
I would like to make a motion in that case. I would like to make a motion that the WSESD board approve the budget as outlined, $62,704,054 for the FY24 year.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Michelle, for that second. All those is there any other discussion before we move forward? Okay, so all those in favor of the motion for the WSESD board to approve the budget as outlined for fiscal year 2024, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Frank and Mark and everyone. I think we probably all echo Lana's thanks for.
Thank you.
Sean.
Now that we've finished that budget, that was tremendous conversation and questions, I thought. So Tim and I and David actually attended a forum at the Brooks Library on January 14th. And it was Michaela and 7 students, and it was in honor of Martin Luther King Day. And it was tremendous. It was, it was sort of a PowerPoint, a lot of questions of the audience, participation of the audience, which included Becca Balin and Emily Garnhauser. And so it was really good.
Good to hear.
So I think we're just on to new business, the retirements and resignations.
Okay, we have one resignation, Jesse Kreitzer, who's works in the filmmaking program here at the Career Center. He'll be resigning at the end of the school year.
Is there a motion to accept the resignation of Jesse Kreitzer?
So moved with regret.
Thank you, Anne. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Liz. All those in favor of accepting the resignation of Jesse Kreitzer, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, so thank you.
I have a very brief executive session on an employee contract.
Okay. So
Just share one thing that came up in the last 2 days quickly.
sure.
And that is, I just wanted to share with the board that the governor has done a number of visits where he leaves the town capital for a day and brings several of his cabinet members with him. That will happen here in Brattleboro on February 6th. And WRCC will be by the secretary, the Vermont Secretary of Education, for a tour. I don't know if he's visiting any other schools or not, but.
Great. Really, we have another new hire. I forgot about. I'll let Kate introduce it.
Okay.
So we have Judy Chapman hired as our new administrative assistant at Green Street School.
And that doesn't need to be voted on. That's just really an FYI. It's exciting.
Okay. All right. So,
So can I ask a question?
sure.
February 6th. It's quite a busy day. Yes. Does this mean we should all clear our calendar for that day? No. Okay.
You do not need to clear your calendar. I just wanted you to know that he was coming.
So I can't get to meet him?
Well, you can if you want to come. He's only gonna be here for about 45 minutes to an hour, but.
That's it?
Yeah, it's just coming for a quick tour. So. No details.
Okay, so can I have a motion? You said it was contracts? Okay, so can I have a motion for a specific finding that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body or person involved at a substantial disadvantage, with the understanding that there will be a second motion to go into executive session under contracts? Can I have a motion for that finding? Thank you, Robin. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Deborah. All those in favor of making that finding, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, so then is there a motion to go into executive session under 1 VSA 313A1A contracts?
So moved.
Thank you, Liz. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Michelle. All those in favor of going into executive session under 1 VSA 313A1A contracts, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Will we be making a decision, or is it just a?
You will.
Okay, so we will have expected action when we come out of executive session, and inviting Mark. Just Mark. Okay.
Into the icebox.
Into the icebox.
Okay. So we are in executive session at 8 o'clock. So we are out of executive session at 8:08. Anne, would you like to make a motion?
I move that we uphold the recommendation of the superintendent with regard to a contract.
Second.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Liz. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. It would appear that we have conducted all our business for the evening. And
Madam Chair, there being no further business before this board, I move that we adjourn.
thank you, Anne. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Liz. All those in favor of adjourning for the evening, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, wonderful. We are adjourned at 8:09.